Hey folks, Denise Howell here, and you're tuned in for This Week in Law, a special Hollywood edition today with Tim Street, Eriq Gardner, and Evan Brown. We'll talk YouTube DMCA takedowns, the artist formerly known as television, and sweeping up after yourself at the hair salon. DNA theft? No! Join us next on This Week in Law.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiL.
Bandwidth for This Week in Law is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiL, This Week in Law with Denise Howell, episode 127, recorded September 2nd, 2011. Smells like Albert Einstein. This episode of This Week in Law is brought to you by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies on your PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or TV instantly. All streamed directly to you, saving you time, money, and hassle. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit. Hey, geeks and geekas, it's Denise Howell here, and you're tuned in for This Week in Law, where we fervently hope that you'll stay on the internet and out of court. We've got a great Hollywood-oriented panel with us today, a bona fide Hollywood producer, in fact, Tim Street, joining us from Hollywood. Hi, Tim. How are you?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful to see you again. Tim is involved in such wonderful projects as French Made TV. You may have seen him there, and lots of other digital media through the years. And so he's got lots of knowledge and insight on those fronts, and we're thrilled to have him. Thanks so much for joining us, Tim.
Sure. Hey, glad to be here.
Also making a return visit to This Week in Law is Eriq Gardner, the Hollywood reporter Esquire himself. Hello, Eriq.
How you doing? Pleasure to be back.
Wonderful to see you again. We were just chatting before we went live that Eriq, although he is the Hollywood reporter Esquire, lives in New York and safely made it through last week's interesting weather events, which we're thrilled about, and glad you could join us today.
I think I'm alive. I'll have to save that discussion for This Week in Philosophy.
That's good. You're looking definitely corporeal and solid. So glad to see you there. Also joining us again is Evan Brown from Chicago. Hello, Evan.
Hey, Denise. How's it going?
Going great. Wonderful to see you again this week. We have some digital media collides with Hollywood and the entertainment industry kind of stories on deck this week. Starting off, our good friend Justine had a little interesting episode earlier this week, I believe it was, when she did a video sending off Steve Jobs from his CEO position, a nice tribute homage to the wonderful job that he's done there at Apple. And she posted it on YouTube, as she is wont to do. And an organization called Web Sheriff DMCA'd her and pulled that video down. Interestingly, it seems to be on, there is the sad face showing that her original posting on YouTube is no longer with us. But guess what? It is available elsewhere on YouTube. So maybe we can play a couple of minutes of that if we have it queued up in the studio so you guys can see what we're talking about here.
I've had a lot of time with the Mac around. It's been a long time since I've been in your town. Next time you won't be the CEO.
So as you can see, this is a parody of a Lady Gaga number where, in the spirit of people like Weird Al Yankovic, for example, Justine has adopted the song, changed the words, and put her own unique spin on it. Thanks, studio. I think we've shown folks what we're talking about here. Let's talk for a moment about folks making digital media like this and the notion of getting a DMCA takedown and get more into the organization behind the original takedown, Web Sheriff. Tim, you tipped me off to this. What's your take on what happened here?
Well, I think that the Lady Gaga's folks, the record label, had web sheriff working for them. I don't know that for a fact, but it seems that they picked up on the music and they gave it a takedown notice. To me, looking at it, there's a couple things. I mean, one, I think that that's just like an automatic trigger. A lot of these services that are hired by labels and studios employ algorithms, but they also employ low-paid workers, and it's easier to say, no, you can't do this, than it is to just let it go. In the case of parody, it's, you can parody something, but I also question, whether or not it is a parody of Lady Gaga. I mean, it's a parody of her song, but it's more focused on Steve Jobs. It's not really making fun of her song. It's using it as a vehicle for Steve Jobs. So I could see an argument either way on this one.
Mm-hmm. Eriq, we were talking before the show about Web Sheriff in general. Maybe you could give us some background on them and what your understanding is of their function for the entertainment industry.
Sure. Well, as it turns out, I actually happened to talk to Web Sheriff himself yesterday, so I got a little background on his organization. To give you an idea, it's a 20-person organization based in the UK. There's lots of computers around. Tim is exactly right. They do use computer algorithms, but they also have people sitting in front of computers, and whenever something is flagged, they roll into action. I asked whether or not, how much analysis goes into before they send their takedown notices, and there seems to be some. They certainly analyze the material. I'm sure that a lot of people would say that they don't go as far as they need to in analyzing things like fair use, and that's certainly a fair criticism. And I would bet that they probably side on the air of being a little overprotective rather than side on the air of being too generous in terms of people's allowances with copyright. But this is an organization that's been employed by a lot of people in the entertainment industry. They work on retainer for a bunch of companies and a bunch of musicians. A lot of their efforts go towards trying to prevent leaks of unreleased stuff. They also provide some sort of contingency service for smaller labels and smaller musicians, where they get paid based on their success rate in taking down stuff. So that's kind of an interesting little twist.
What do you think about the fact that they managed to pull down her video from YouTube once, but it's back up there again?
Well, I asked him about that, and he acknowledges the fact that it's very hard for them to be 100% successful and eradicate some perceived copyright infringement across the internet. He knows that's not going to happen. His goal is really to make it pretty difficult for pirates. So just stepping away from that video for a second, some leak of some new album comes out, and obviously, if you are a devoted person wanting to find that album on the internet, if you spend enough time, you will find it somewhere. But his main modus operandi is to close off the paths that are easiest for people looking. So if you go on YouTube and search for this iJustine video, you might come across the first video that was taken down, see that it was taken down for copyright purposes, and give up on that search. Of course, we now know that the video goes up again, and if you're a hardcore searcher, you will eventually find it. And there's, it's very hard for any content creator to do anything about that. They can continually fight, but I think they're resigned and to at least stamping out, most of what they perceive to be abuse.
I don't know if this is a fair analogy, but I keep thinking of Right Haven when I think of these folks. I wondered if you got the chance to ask them how much legal action they'll actually undertake for clients, what they do, for example, if there's a counter notice filed.
Right. I don't think that the Right Haven analogy is exactly appropriate here. Right Haven is a company that was purportedly assigned the rights to copyrights, and they filed lawsuits, so they had to represent themselves in court as the owner of copyright. These guys see themselves as the agents, and they are authorized on behalf of copyright holders to file takedown notices, which is a little bit of a different thing. They certainly, if this was a direct employee of the company, I don't think anyone would question their authority to do it. So they see themselves as agents, and I really don't think that there's too much wrong with that. Also, I have to say that I did ask, and the main guy, John, who leads the web share thing, he is a lawyer. He used to work in-house at some music company, and based on all their activities, there's a lot of stuff that they do that I think couldn't be done without a lot of legal training. For instance, if they come across a web infringement on a website, they might send a takedown notice, and there might be an objection to that. So they'll ramp up their activities. They'll go to the ISPs, and they'll read their terms of service with the website, and they'll read it back to them and cite them chapter and verse about how a website is potentially in flagrance to their agreements, as well as the country's laws on ISPs, the threat of litigation. So mainly, they are doing a lot of lawyering, or at least putting a lot of legal pressure on these companies. I don't think that they've overstepped their bounds in terms of what they're really authorized to do. But they are a web sheriff in every sense of the word. They're not just doing copyright stuff too. They're doing libel. They're doing privacy actions. There's one thing that they recently did was to try to get a terrorist had posted a video of an American soldier getting beheaded, a kidnapped soldier, and it was their job to figure out a way to get that video off of the internet. So they, traced the path and contacted ISPs. So they do a lot of reading of legal contracts and figuring out the best method. The DMCA notice thing is just one of the things that they do.
Tim, have you run across these guys before? Have you been DMCA'd by them? And are they the only sheriff in town? Is this kind of a cottage industry springing up?
Well, they got me for digital horse wrestling. And they put me in jail for no. I've never run into them before. Interesting enough, though, I was talking to YouTube about the iJustine video, and what their take on it was that they really stay out of the fray on things. If they get a takedown notice, they take it down, and they let people work it out amongst themselves. And apparently you get 3 strikes on YouTube. If you get into a copyright infringement 3 times on YouTube, then your account will be suspended. And we were talking about overall accounts and how to deal with things in the partner program. And they said that's one of the problems that you have to worry about if you combine your accounts as a partner on YouTube, that if one of your accounts gets 3 strikes, then your overall account gets taken down as well. They did talk about how you can do a counter attack on the person who sent you a notice, but they would rather just stay out of it and let the partners work things out amongst themselves. But the other thing that jumps out at me about that video of iJustine's, besides the Lady Gaga music, are the photos that are being used. I mean, it's one thing to parody a song, like in Weird Al's case, but you're using photos that are taken. I'm curious, how is that fair use?
Right. That's an excellent point, and another basis that could be asserted for copyright infringement. However, I doubt that web sheriff represents the people who took the photo, or the rights holders for those photos. Evan, we're getting a lot of questions in the IRC as this discussion goes on about why this is not a First Amendment violation to pull down something like this. You want to address that question?
I think it's pretty clearly an infringement. I, would pick up on what Tim was saying. In Tim's first comments, he was pointing out very well how this is the merits of a fair use defense are questionable at best. It reminds me of a case that came down from the Ninth Circuit. It's been probably about 15 years or so ago. I know it's been since the O.J. Simpson trial, so since this is such a Southern California-centric kind of focus today, this is appropriate to talk about this. There was a copyright case from the Ninth Circuit. The work at issue was called The Cat Not in the Hat. A guy calling himself Dr. Juice, I think, if I'm remembering all this correctly, wrote a book in the style of Dr. Seuss to tell the story of the O.J. Simpson trial. And the Ninth Circuit held that that was not a fair use. It wasn't a parody for the reason that Tim was suggesting. This is not making fun of Lady Gaga or critiquing her style. This is merely using Lady Gaga's style and an imitation of that style to critique another issue. So when it's so colorable that there is an infringement here, that makes it pretty clear to me that the First Amendment isn't really going to be at play, notwithstanding the fact that the First Amendment goes to constrain government restrictions on speech, or to prevent government restrictions on speech. These are all private individuals and the private individuals' rights that we're talking about here. So there's a couple of strong points on which we can hang our hat to say that the First Amendment doesn't factor too much into this. So that's how I would address that issue.
Yes. Though we all live in the United Republic of Google, it's not quite official. There's no flag yet, anything like that. So
that's right.
Yes, I agree with you. I Googled around a little bit before the show because I was interested in this notion of using someone's melody and different words. And of course, Weird Al Yankovic is sort of the poster child for doing that. And, I don't know how good my internet-based information is, but I did read something about how he does go around and get permission from all the acts he does parodies of, and that he's actually taken things out at the last minute when permission was withdrawn. So I think you guys are probably honing in on the fact that parody wouldn't be much help to Justine here. So it's sad because it's a good video and a good tribute to Steve Jobs, but she's probably someone who may find herself coming more under fire from these kinds of organizations if that's the kind of video that gets made. Let's move on. Since I've got this really media savvy panel here today, something that is sort of a bigger issue in the context of what's going on in the news recently. We've got Netflix finally raising its rates officially. We've got Apple killing TV rentals and not looking to offer subscriptions anytime soon. We've got Eriq Schmidt saying that TV makers will adopt Apple TV within 5 years. And I'm just interested to get your take, Tim, on what you think the future of television is today. Where is this all going? Where will the artist formerly known as television be in the next few years?
Well, that's a pretty big question. There's a lot of stuff going on there. My day job right now is for a technology company, Dialogue, and we're really focused on TV everywhere and on monetizing TV everywhere through advertising for doing ad insertion on connected devices like the iPhone, the iPod, iPad, Roku, Boxy, all these over-the-top devices. And if you look at consumer behavior, what they want to watch what they want to watch when they want to watch it on the best available device at that particular time. And so that's kind of laying the groundwork for what we're seeing. They also don't really want to pay for that. They want it free. So the alternative, unfortunately, is advertising. And that's, what our technology does is enable that. But in looking at the bigger picture, when you go back to the early days of television, there were radio shows that were put on TV. People were literally standing in front of microphones doing a radio show, pretty similar to what we're doing now. I mean, we're basically doing a radio show on the internet. Although there is the IRC, we're able to have some interactivity here. There is a format to what we're doing, but it's not that different from a call-in radio show type format. Mm-hmm. And when you look at what's happening with Netflix and Hulu, we're taking TV shows, or in the case of YouTube, things that are like TV shows, and putting them on the internet. And the internet's an interactive device. So we haven't seen those new interactive formats develop yet. Television was the same way. It wasn't until Desi Arnaz came up with a show called I Love Lucy that we really had a multi-camera sitcom format. I mean, there were the Honeymooners came before I Love Lucy, but the I Love Lucy was really that first interactive format. And before that, we had variety shows, Uncle Milty, Howdy Doody, those types of things were new formats that were developed for TV. And when you look at the internet, popular stuff right now is premium television programming. iJustine's popular. Folks like iJustine, whether it's Ray William Johnson or Mr. Guitar Man, Shane Dawson, Phil DeFranco, they're doing video blogs on the internet that are cut very in kind of a Zay Frank way. And those are popular, but we don't have true interactivity yet. And I'm not talking about choose your own ending kind of thing. I'm talking about a way that the audience can engage in content, whether it's, voting for American Idol or participating in a trivia game. Those interactive shows aren't out there yet. And I think that's where TV's going to head on the internet, but it takes time. We didn't get Sopranos when cable first started. We got You Can't Do That on TV, and the production qualities were immensely different.
Mm-hmm. Eriq, I think it's pretty interesting, this development with Fox, where they, I love watching my Glee episodes on Hulu, or I have traditionally loved watching them there, because if I missed one when I was putting my kid to bed or whatever, I could go on to Hulu and it would be immediately there. No more with that. They're delaying their releases to Hulu. And there was some talk that there was a spike in piracy related to that, because people couldn't have that immediate gratification of getting their shows. What did you find out about that?
Well, it's still at an early stage. I think we'll learn more about this next month when all the big shows come back and to see how Fox does and whether there's a huge spike in piracy. There were reports a couple of weeks ago on the two shows that Fox is showing new shows, which were two food shows. I think one was the Kitchen Nightmares and another food show, and reports were that those two shows had spiked in piracy to a huge percentage. Fox says that it's a little too early to make any firm determinations about this sort of thing, but I expect that they knew that this was coming. I also think just to say, put my 2 cents in here, that online TV is going to happen, and if you need proof of it, it's that a reporter for Hollywood Reporter, which would be me, has cut cords. I got rid of cable service about a year ago, and I use a Roku, and I stream stuff, and I watch Glee. I'll admit that online. So it is going to happen. I sense that the broadcasters are a little bit nervous. They haven't really figured out exactly how it's going to happen, but it will happen. And I think consumers are frustrated and fairly, really, because I've seen a lot of them. Some of them are even volunteering to put up money for shows, and they don't understand why these networks aren't being more out there with their offerings. And I could say that really it comes down to two issues that go less talked about. The first issue really is there needs to be some settlement on the whole retransmission fee sort of thing. Over the years, there's been lots of fights between on one side the broadcaster and on the other side the cable and satellite distributors. Every few years the contract comes up for renewal, and there's this huge standoff, and usually it happens right before the NFL playoffs. So there's a lot of press about it. Like, are people going to be able to watch the Oscars this year, or is the network going to be taken off the cable show? I think that a lot of broadcasters are nervous that if the content is available online, that it's going to undercut them in negotiations with cable and satellite providers. So if there's a settlement on that issue, I think and that will go a long way towards allowing broadcasters to feel a bit more comfortable about putting things online. The second major issue, I would say, is that there still isn't a great way to measure audience for online television. If online viewers and set-box viewers were treated equally in terms of ratings, that would go a long way, because then they could use online viewership for to account for advertising, and they could take it to their advertisers and monetize it that way. But right now, to the broadcasters, they see people watching online, and they think that they're not really being counted for advertising purposes, and so they perceive that they're losing out. When it comes to a time when the net measurement firms start doing a better job in terms of measuring all the people watching online, then there'll be a lot of the broadcasters might loosen up, and they'll allow a lot of their shows to be broadcast pretty quickly after they show up on the TV screen.
I think that you're touching on something that's really interesting there, and that's that there is a dirty little secret in terms of the ratings that are out there. They aren't always that accurate, and TV is getting overpaid for that. And with Omniture ComScore, you can really tell, what videos have been watched. You can look at quartiles and see all the analytics. You can know what device somebody's watching on, what part of the country they're watching on. I mean, the addressability of these new connected devices is really what cable television's wanted all along, but it does upset the advertising market because the numbers are different from how they're being reported in television right now.
I would think that the television entertainment industry would want to embrace online as soon as possible, because the one thing I experience when I watch something online as opposed to at my home in a traditional television setting is commercials, because I don't see those anymore at home. I record things and I watch them after the fact. And I'm sure, ultimately we'll get to a place where you can do that with legally distributed online content, but it doesn't seem to be there yet, and I would think they're thrilled about that. What do you think, Tim?
Well, when you're getting $3.5 billion a year in licensing fees for your cable channels, who's going to pay you for that on the internet? Nobody. So you have to be really careful about upsetting the cable operators who are paying those licensing fees. And then in addition to that, you have to decide who's getting what advertising inventory. So in cable, the programmer gets the national feed, and the cable operator gets the local avails for the ad inventory. And so that's kind of what's I'm seeing work out in the connected device space. And so there are there are a lot of experimentation that's going on right now, and this fall I think we'll see some some new projects launch that will, really take the next step to roll this out. But it's a big endeavor. There's a lot of people that have to get on board and agree to it before TV Everywhere really happens. And those conversations are happening now. And there are some digital channels that are being put out that are kind of testing. So if you go on Roku now, you can check out a Fox News network that isn't the Fox News network that you get on your cable, but it's a Fox News digital channel on Roku, and that's kind of testing out what can happen in this space. And next week there's going to be a financial news network that'll be launching in the space on connected devices as well. And so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out and how it's measured and how the advertising works on it.
Evan, what do you think about the whole tension between tight controls and piracy? The tighter the controls are, the more piracy there is because people get frustrated. It seems to me that, this Hulu Fox example is a good one of the entertainment folks not having quite gotten that message.
Yeah, a couple of points on that. For one, it really should come as no surprise that there is an increase in piracy if we're going to begin from the starting point of assuming that there actually is a demand for this content. And given the size of the industry, I think it would be silly to dispute that there is a real demand for this type of content. The other point would be something in a larger sense that I really don't have anything to add to. There are so many people in this conversation who are much smarter than I am when it comes to looking at what the optimal model for the distribution and monetization of content online and or through the cable should be. But what is clear from all of this is that there is something very strange, and indeed it would be tragic if the content owners, the rights holders in this scenario, in this marketplace, are going to be so attached to a incumbent sense of rights, being in the position of the rights holders and having enjoyed being the fat cats for years and years and years on all of this stuff. It would be very tragic to not see the transition into the more modern era of where content is going to be distributed online and through mobile devices and everything else, to let that old view of rights slow down that process for a freer distribution of content, which would satisfy consumer demand in such a more effective way and would, by necessity or of natural consequence, be the exploitation of these rights in a way that gets the content into more people's hands in ways that they want to consume it. It seems impossible or implausible to me that would not help the bottom line for the content industry here. So to answer your question in a pointed way, it should come as no surprise that there is an increase in piracy, and that is a symptom of obviously an unresolved problem that big content needs to figure out one way or the other how to manage.
So speaking of copyright infringement, we have a lot of stories on this show about folks like iJustine who have someone who is a rights holder affected by the work that they've made, who's pulled their things down, and the legal dispute tends to stop right there because people don't have a lot of resources to contest allegations of copyright infringement. Eriq, you wrote recently about producer Dr. Luke and his interesting response to allegations that he copies songs. What's going on there?
Right, yeah. Well, Dr. Luke produces songs for a lot of today's top pop musicians. One might figure him for some of the blame for a lot of the derivativeness that in today's pop music, but that's another story. I guess what's happening really is that there comes times when people accuse him of stealing a song, and he strikes back by filing a defamation lawsuit, saying, before you accuse me, this is going to hamper my own ability to enjoy publishing rights, because the record labels are going to demand indemnification, and what you're saying is going to damage my reputation in the industry, and people are going to know me for being a copier instead of a creative person. It's just, I guess, as I wrote, this is just the creative landscape that we live in, the kind of like a postmodern era where people take inspiration from other songs, and then people go on YouTube and point blame and say, those two songs sound alike, therefore they must be copies, and issues about what exactly is a copy and what is inspiration has long existed, but today people go, like I said, go onto YouTube, go on the Twitter, and blare allegations around. So he's taking some proactive steps against this by filing these defamation claims and getting at least a couple of the defendants to settle and to state in stipulated agreements that the works were created independently. So on one hand, he's being vocal against other people being litigious and suing over copyright infringement. On the other hand, he's being litigious himself. He's going to court to protect his reputation. It's an interesting pull and tug here.
Yep, it's always interesting when someone does not just accept the allegations, but rather fires back. I do want to take a break for a moment before we go on to discuss such things as ESPN's social media policy and why it's lame to make users use real names on things like Google+. But before we get to that, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode of This Week in Law, which is Netflix, which although its new prices are in effect, I've got to say, I was one of the first to sign up for my plan that includes Netflix Instant and the DVD, because I think it's worth every single penny that it costs each month. It really is such a convenience and a great service that they've rolled out, because it includes thousands of TV episodes and movies that you can watch anytime on any device. That saves you so much time, money, and hassle. For me, as with a youngster who frequently goes through 4 seasons of a cartoon series at a time, it's really, I don't know how I could live without it. And we use the service on all kinds of devices, including, you can use a computer, of course. The iPad makes it terribly convenient to take with you wherever you go. You can watch on your phone if that's what you've got with you. Lots of Android phones and, of course, the iPhone work with the Netflix Instant service. If you have a game console, an Xbox 360 or a PS3, a Nintendo Wii, they all work with Netflix. And if you're not a gamer, you can watch it on an Apple TV or a Roku box, which are wonderful tools in their own right, and Netflix just makes them even better. You can watch movies and TV shows instantly using any of these devices, and you can begin watching your show on one device and pick it up again on another device, which, again, is just, they've thought about the end user and having a great experience, and that's just evidence of it. So whichever way you choose to access Netflix, you can watch as many movies and TV shows as you want at any time. There's no limit. You pay that monthly fee, and you are good to go, and you can cancel anytime. But you don't even have to pay the monthly fee to give it a try if you're not already a customer. You can get it for 30 days free by going to netflix.com/twit. Be sure to use that URL when you sign up. It tells them that we directed them there and directed you there, and that's something we want them to know. We thank Netflix for their support of This Week in Law and the TWiT Network, and we hope you enjoy watching Netflix instantly. We touched on the First Amendment briefly, talking about iJustine's video and how it wouldn't come into play there because it's not a government action. We have a couple of stories where the First Amendment might well come into play. One following up, not really an entertainment story, but I wanted to get to it because we have talked about it a lot on the show before, and there's a lot of uncertainty about what you can do if you're being arrested and you have, this portable television studio with you that we all carry these days, your cell phone that you can either stream or capture video and post it up later. Evan, I guess we have finally someone saying that you have a First Amendment right to video the police in public places. Can you let us know what's going on there?
Sure, and it's not just someone. This is a federal circuit court of appeals, which is the second layer in the three-tiered cake. That is the federal judiciary. You're just right below the Supreme Court. So this is the First Circuit coming out of a case in Massachusetts, and what happened was, we've seen this fact scenario play out in a number of situations before. A guy was walking along the park. It just happened to be Boston Commons, which, as I've learned from reading accounts of this, is the oldest public park in the United States. So, the real archetypal kind of place for there to be a First Amendment issue playing out. He saw a guy being arrested, and he took out, I guess it was his phone, and started filming, and the cops saw him, and how cops can be, got all huffy about it, and asked if he was if that was recording audio as well. And when he said yes, they arrested him under the state's wiretapping statute, which prohibits the interception of oral communications like that. So he was charged. He was found not guilty for that crime, but that wasn't enough for him. He turned around and sued the police department and some other local government officials, alleging a constitutional violation, that it was a violation of his First Amendment right to be arrested like that. And as their defense, the cops asserted this notion called qualified immunity, which is a lack of being able to be found responsible or liable for something. If you are a government official and you're acting within your official capacity, and whatever you do is not a violation of a clear and established constitutional right. So the cops had argued, hey, we can't be responsible for this because it wasn't clear whether arresting someone for filming us was a violation of the First Amendment right. The lower court, the district court, rejected that argument, said, look, this is a clearly established right. And more importantly, now the appellate court has upheld that decision, saying, yes, it is an established right to to be able to an established First Amendment right to be able to film the cops doing what they're doing. And the court made some really interesting and I think important statements about this, talking about how important it is in this day and age that the ability to hold the police accountable like this is an important liberty interest to safeguard our liberty, and that this is an important First Amendment right in that. So. This is the first time that a court this high, with this much power, much jurisdiction, has ruled on this issue. So, and it definitely comes out in favor of the First Amendment interest, First Amendment right in holding the cops accountable for all of this stuff. So, for those of us who have had concerns that our civil liberties were being constrained because of these overzealous prosecutions on these things, this decision certainly is a positive development.
Do you have any sense for what the future of these state wiretapping laws are that law enforcement has been using to say, hey, you can't film us despite what your First Amendment rights may be? Do you think this jeopardizes those kinds of laws, or just will cause them to be more narrowly applied?
Well, the only way that they could be salvaged, or new versions of them could be salvaged, would be if they are very narrowly drafted, so that the restriction is very narrow, so that like the restriction would be you can't actually get in the physical way of the cop making the arrest or something like that. That would be where the law is narrowly tailored to satisfy this compelling government interest of being able to apprehend the bad guy. The Constitution itself tells us that federal law, federal jurisprudence will trump, that is supreme to will preempt any state statutes. So to the extent that there are any state statutes that are so broad that they out and out prohibit the filming of cops. I think that those state legislatures should be concerned that these statutes will be held unconstitutional. We certainly see that. And, if the states actually want to go and have these type of interests in play, then it's something that maybe even for political reasons they would want to revisit sometime in the near future.
Great. Well, thanks for the update there. It's been something we've been watching with great interest.
Sure thing.
Somebody has been watching a Buddhist leader based in Maryland. Her name is Alice Zioli. There's a New York Times article about this. A gentleman, although I use that term loosely in this context, named William Lawrence Cassidy, has been posting over 8,000 posts on Twitter that are unkind, to say the least. They don't seem to be overtly threatening against Ms. Zioli, but they are certainly not the kind of thing she would want to wake up to with her morning coffee every day. And there is a question. The man was arrested and apparently is going to be prosecuted under federal harassment type charges because of these posts on Twitter. But it raises the question of, we were talking about the Boston Commons, what Twitter is as far as being a public space for saying things. Because I think if someone stood out in the middle of the Boston Commons and said not nice things about Ms. Zioli, they would have a good case against getting arrested. They're in a public place, they're exercising their free speech rights. And so we're confronted with the question of what the heck is Twitter, I think, and other, popular public online forums by this case. Of course, on Twitter, if Ms. Zioli doesn't want to see these unkind things about her, she can, of course, block this guy. Which is something you can't exactly do in a public place except by simply avoiding it. So I'm wondering what you guys think about this episode where, we're talking about Hollywood and concerns of the entertainment industry and celebrities. And it seems to me like this would be something near and dear to the heart of anyone who's a public figure, which is, of course, a moving target these days as well. What do you think of this, Tim?
Well, it certainly makes for good fodder and great character development in terms of what you could do in creating interactive programming that has characters fighting on Twitter. Taking a look at the web, when you look at the different communities that are developing, it's very similar to a small town village. You bring up Boston Commons, but if you took the scuba diving industry, for example, that industry is a global, local industry. So it's a village unto itself, even though it's global. Mm-hmm. And people that are interested in scuba diving and, if they want to talk bad about other scuba divers and how lame they are at scuba diving, it doesn't really, they have a First Amendment right to do so. So for that guy being arrested, unless he's done something that is threatening or breaks laws in terms of the terms of service use on Twitter or the ISP, I think he's got a First Amendment right.
All right. What do you think, Kevin?
I think that the nature of Twitter and the way that the communications can be both public and directed at someone at the same time make this obviously a difficult situation. And I think that the First Amendment considerations, while they are still there, I don't think that they should hold as much sway as something that is purely public, like, standing on a soapbox in the middle of Boston Commons. I'm reminded of an article that James Grimmelman wrote last year. James Grimmelman is a law professor at New York University Law School, and he was talking about this in the nature of privacy and how with digital technologies, the person's identity can be so singled out on the web. It's not like that a Twitter username is some kind of semantically uncertain designator of who a person is. When you have an @ username, you know exactly who you're talking about, and not only do other Twitter users know precisely who it is you're talking about, but that person, to the extent that they are monitoring their @ mentions in Twitter, they know that they are being spoken to in these types of things. So the First Amendment analysis should not change whatsoever, because the First Amendment is something that is much more grounded in a slow-moving progression of time, and shouldn't be, its interpretation should not easily be subjected to the vicissitudes of time and the ever-advancing pace of technology. But what we do see here is a technology that provides a special means of communication that privatizes the communication, makes it much more direct, and thereby much more capable of causing harm to the recipient of those communications. And that effect is unaffected, or is not diminished by the fact that it's also a public communication at the same time. So I am very reluctant to say, oh, this guy has a First Amendment right, period. That's the end of the analysis. There's something much more sinister at work here than just a mere public communication to the whole world.
Right. This guy's past has not helped him, I would venture to say, in being charged by the FBI with what he's being charged with here. Apparently he's, trespassed and had charges of arson and domestic violence, assault, etc. In the past. So maybe there is some selective enforcement that, if someone with a less checkered past had behaved this way on Twitter, maybe they wouldn't find themselves facing these charges. I don't know that that's necessarily fair or a proper application of the law, but it may be a reality. Eriq, what do you think about it? Probably, the celebrity aspect of the Hollywood world would like to see this guy put in jail. What do you think?
I'm having a little trouble making the connections to Hollywood and celebrities and all that. But I will say this: although this person is not the most sympathetic figure, and obviously doesn't seem to be a very nice guy, my main worry is how these cyber stalking harassment statutes are going to be applied in other cases. We talked in the last segment about whether government could restrict free speech without a compelling interest. I think there is a case to be made here that maybe not in this particular instance, but a lot of these cyber stalking statutes are written rather broadly, and they do have the potential to chill speech. I'm also thinking, what kind of precedent do we want to make? Right now, we see a lot of countries like Iran or Syria where there's protests going on, and people are using Twitter to make to make their opinions known, and there's really nothing stopping these governments from intervening and using excuses like the fact that if you name a political leader, that might be a form of harassment. So I'd be very careful. I know I get Evan's point, but on the other hand, I'm really not clear cut that these statutes are written to directly address a private grievance, and instead of not interfering with the public realm. And and Hollywood is usually very strong when it comes to free speech matters. So as much as they might not like this one particular guy, I think overall that they might recognize the fact that promoting the prevalence of the First Amendment is what is paramount here.
Yep, good point. Well, speaking of folks doing things online that could get them in trouble, or other reasons why they might want to stay anonymous, Evan, you had a good little graphic to share with our audience about why requiring real names, which is often done in the name of making people accountable when they do things like the William Lawrence Cassidy we were just discussing, the man who posted all these not so nice things on Twitter. Why it's, even given all those considerations, requiring real names is not a good thing. Evan, you want to give us a little context on the Yelp review of Ford's Theater? I think we have a graphic.
Yes, and the whole point of this is requiring people to use their real name takes all the fun out of it. The graphic that I hope we can bring up, if we can, oh, there it is on the screen for those of you who are watching the video, is a screen capture from Yelp, and this appeared on the Daily Watt in the last week or so. That is of course one of the popular sites on the Cheeseburger Network. Really, really funny site, and so it's a screen capture from Yelp, and it's a review of Ford's Theater, that famous historical landmark in Washington, D.C. that saw the assassination of President Lincoln back in April of 1865, and it's a popular tourist destination now and all that stuff. So what we see here is a review of Ford's Theater. It has 71 reviews, but this one here is a profile by Abe L. from Washington, D.C., and the little avatar there is a very well-known photograph of Abe L. And most Lincoln humor is not all that funny, but this actually made me laugh out loud. He only gave it 2 stars, and his review was murdered here, would not recommend. So this is just invaluable humor, and if this doesn't add to the important dialogue that goes on in our country to foster civilization and free expression, I don't know what it is, because this is really good. And if we're going to be so uptight about people using their real names, then this critically important facet of the public discourse is going to be stricken. So that's why I think it would just be abhorrent to require people to use their real names, unless this really is Abe L. Coming back from beyond the grave to sign up and activate his account on Yelp.
He was pretty generous at 2 stars, I would have to say.
I thought so too. I thought that, and I know that you have to give at least 1 star. You can't give 0 stars on Yelp. So that is maybe. I'm not going to say anymore, but because most Lincoln humor is not funny, and so I'm not going to just say something that's not funny. But yeah, that is generous. 2 out of 5 ain't bad.
Yeah. All right. Well, if Abe were working at whether in the White House or elsewhere these days, he would probably find himself subject to some kind of social media policy. And a pretty interesting thing happened in the last week or so, where ESPN's social media policy that applies to its reporters, I don't think it was a public link. I don't think it was supposed to be made public, but it still has not been locked down. So it's there for folks to take a look at in PDF form. Or maybe they have locked it down. I'm linking to it from...
Maybe it came from Julian Assange's hard drive.
Possibly. Anyway, ESPN's social media policy got out. And it's pretty interesting, I think, in the context of... media in general and who is a public figure, something we've been kind of touching on in other stories today, because they have some pretty tight, I would say, controls on what they want people who work at ESPN, how they want them using social media, with some the very specific pronouncement that they are not to break stories in that forum, that that is by implication a valuable intellectual property of their employer, and that they have to give that forum the opportunity to break those stories, and then you could foster the discussion in various social media. So I wanted to toss that out to you guys and see what you think of this policy in general and the breaking stories stipulation in particular. Eriq, what do you think?
Well, I've always thought about this because, I'm a reporter myself. I'm also a huge sports fan, so I've always been amazed at all these sports reporters going out on Twitter and breaking news. And I often ask myself, why are they doing that? Like, what's in it for them? But, in the end, Twitter is an amazing tool, and it definitely builds the brand of each of these reporters. And I can see why an organization like ESPN would want to control that. What really kind of concerns me is the particular part of the policy where the reporters aren't allowed to discuss how a story was put together, how it was edited, or things in the future, the interviews and all that. And that's very, very territorial. And just if I was a reporter working for ESPN, it would concern me, the heavy-handedness they're involved. There's just it is so much opportunity for employee to get in trouble for something said on Twitter. If I was an employee for at ESPN, I would really think twice about even having an account on the social service, because what benefit is there to do that except to really get in trouble? So I mean, it's perfectly within ESPN's rights to demand this sort of control, but I think it should kind of just from a broad social aspect, it should kind of concern us that employers are really controlling in this way. I don't necessarily know if there's really a legal issue involved.
Yeah, it's not. It's maybe an employment legal issue. It's not a free speech one necessarily, unless you work for the government. But it does, I think, go to sort of what the standard in various industries is for how they let people use social media. And in the entertainment broadcast industry, it seems like there's some concern about what the people within that industry will do with what would otherwise be content. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, if I had an editor working for me and they were cutting footage and they made that footage available on the internet and not on my website and not where I wanted it posted and not before I wanted it posted, I'd be a little bit upset as a producer. So, I mean, I can see ESPN's issue. They're paying somebody to create content for them. And if they're creating that content on Twitter and not driving traffic to ESPN, there's a problem there, So
right.
I personally look at Twitter as derailing my blogging. I find it so much easier to tweet something than to write a blog post, post it, and then tweet about it. It's very convenient. And so, my lazy nature, I'm not blogging as much as I used to. And a lot of that has to do with Twitter. It just derails that. And if you're trying to make money, and you're paying somebody to make money for you, it makes sense that you wouldn't want them tweeting it without driving the traffic back to your site. On a personal level, I think it sucks because I'd like to hear those tweets and hear the breaking news. And, as a reporter, I would think it stinks. But at the same time, it's like, what are you getting paid to do?
Yeah, it's kind of a social media echo of movie windowing. They have certain times and locations and media that they want their material coming out in. And although, the general public might like to see things sooner, and in other venues, there's going to be a tension around that. Evan, what do you think?
Twitter is a great tool to build, personal brand recognition. So I, hop on with what Tim is saying there. If it's going to be used to subvert or somehow derail the original objective of what that person is supposed to be doing and getting paid to do, then any policy that's going to restrict that seems fine with me. And any, termination of employment that is based upon that would seem to be perfectly legitimate. That's, of course, not at all to try to diminish the importance that Twitter can have. It's just that it really can serve as a distraction for some other more primary purpose that the particular individual may have on it. I love using it, of course, but I recognize it for what it is, and if can see Tim's perspective, wouldn't want some people using it in a way that's not what he's hired them to do.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess because I'm a person who is the beneficiary of things that get posted in any media, and I want my news to come as quickly and accurately as possible. And if a reporter is sitting on a piece of important information and not able to talk about it, of national importance, for example, or importance to a select few people, but very important to them, and sitting on that information because of some kind of clampdown from an employer, I think that's kind of short-sighted on the employer not to just let the information out there, and then let their in-depth reporting speak for itself, that, you know, we can really add value to just that tidbit of information that we already, thanks to our wonderful, diligent staff, have brought to you via Twitter. I don't know.
What about the non-hugely important information, the trivial information? I mean, a lot. There's so many stories out there that don't rise to the level of a full-on report, especially for a huge organization like ESPN. Might not. There's just tidbits of information that aren't going to, you know, provide enough solid basis for a big story, and Twitter is the natural forum for getting out those, you know, types of information out there. But if a reporter is worried about, you know, breaching that singular policy, you know, they might hold off on that information. They won't be able to write a story about it. On the other hand, they won't be able to share it too. So it's a no-win situation. I think that's more important than the big stories, because the big stories will come out eventually.
Yep. Excellent point. So speaking of big stories, I think, Eriq, you had quite a nice one that got published in the ABA Journal about something I hadn't really thought about till I read your piece, and thought it was definitely intriguing and important, about, and it made me think twice about, I have a haircut scheduled for next week, about what's going to happen with the clippings that fall on the floor when I leave there. And specifically, your piece is about thievery of genetic material. Seems like that is really a Wild West area of the law right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I started thinking about this piece about a year ago when I was doing a piece on publicity rights, which was another big issue that I've been following. And I came across this one company that was creating DNA from dead celebrities. So they were not DNA. They were creating perfumes. So they were advertising that you could smell like Albert Einstein, for instance. And so I started looking into this company, and I found that actually the person behind the company was the world's biggest collector of hair. They would go to celebrity hair. They would go to these auctions and purchase a strand of Elvis's hair or a strand of Albert Einstein's hair, and then they would use the genetic information to create the smell. So I had this kind of story in the back of my mind about, like, people who are taking DNA from other people. When I heard about the WikiLeaks thing about a year ago, and there was news that the U.S. government, the State Department, had directed its diplomats to start collecting from leaders around the world, political, civil leaders, their DNA evidence. And the question was, well, why are they doing that? The answer probably being that they wanted to start profiling them. And there was a lot of outrage about that, but there wasn't really any analysis about the legality of it all. I mean, really, is it legal to take someone's DNA? If you go to the hair cutting place, and is it fine to pick up some of the hair strands, and what can you do with it? So I started looking into this question, and there was a couple of recent law papers that had been published on directly this topic, and surprisingly, this was a very unregulated space that most states, it's perfectly lawful and legitimate to take someone's DNA surreptitiously. There are some provisions that prevent how you use it, but not too many. And I also found that there are currently a couple of states that are looking to make policies about this, Massachusetts and Vermont being one of them, where they're starting to think of DNA not just as a privacy issue, but also as a property issue, and trying to really think about whether people, we as humans, should have some sort of property over DNA, even if it gets discarded. So there's all sorts of these hypotheticals out there. You know, President Obama goes into a restaurant, eats a waffle, but leaves half of it behind. You know, can some birther come and take that half-eaten waffle and then run a trace on it and prove that he's, you know, I wasn't born in this country? Or, you know, someone gets a hold of Rick Perry's DNA. Can they do a test on it to determine his disposition towards Alzheimer's? And what kind of information, what kind of evidence would that provide towards proving that he's not fit for office? There's a lot of these concerns, and as our DNA age moves forward, this is going to be put in a much bigger spotlight.
Yeah, the other really interesting part of your story, I thought, was the fact that the companies like 23andMe and others that are out there who will analyze your DNA, you know, they may have stipulations in their terms of service that you are supposed to be who you say you are when you submit something for testing. There's no real way they can enforce that.
Absolutely not. I mean, you know, people can send in other people's things, and 23andMe told me that sometimes they run tests about, you know, just to see whether a male submitter is really a male or a female submitter is really a female, but there isn't much they could do. But there's even a bigger problem out there. The very nature of DNA is that we share it with other people. Our family members share our DNA. So say I don't want my DNA being posted on a database. If my brother decides that he does want his DNA being posted in a database, well, there's nothing really I can do about that. You know, people might be able to learn about me, be able to profile me genetically based on what my siblings are doing. And even the 23andMe general counsel told me, you know, there'll come a time when everyone is sequenced in, whether they want to or not. You know, a baby gets born and their parents have already submitted the DNA to these online databases. Well, the baby is already sequenced in, and anyone can look this stuff up.
Right. This is so depressing to me because I know that our Congress and Senate have had a hard time handling privacy legislation in general. And when you throw this kind of concern into the mix, I think it's just going to freeze them entirely. Evan, do you have any hope here?
No, I don't have much hope that Congress is going to, you know, step in anytime soon and do anything meaningful to regulate this. You know, because of that, you know, we're left with the only alternative of relying on private industry and market forces and good business sense to do all this. And we're left to wonder, I suppose, at this point, if there will be such a length of time between the present time now when there is no regulation on this and there is only kind of a nebulous or kind of uncertain set of norms that should govern all this. You know, how much time is going to have to pass between the present time when it is not very well regulated and to a time in the future where it will be much more accessible to the average person to get a lot of information, you know, from the DNA. You know, of course, a lot can be done now. Genetic testing and genetic analysis is very advanced, but you know, for the average person with average budgets, there's really not a whole lot you can do if you have all of this stuff. So it is a very uncertain state of things right now, and we probably can't even imagine fully how much information you actually will be able to extract about someone just from their DNA. We, of course, you know, can know a lot of things, but I imagine that the potential for all of this is even greater with technologies that will arise and to make that knowledge even much more granular. At the same time, we all have unique DNA profiles, of course, and so it's kind of like, well, if this information is if everybody has this set of information about themselves that is out there, is there going to be any real value to having that information about one person being able to be isolated if everybody is subject to this openness and transparency? Maybe it's like Eric Schmidt's characterization of all the kids these days. You know, everybody should change their name when they're 18. Maybe you should just not worry about the fact that your information is out there, because information about everybody is going to be out there, and it may not have all that particularity, and therefore the ability to not do that much of a harm to you.
I was thinking about getting some Michael Crichton DNA and then like cloning it and then writing a book about someone who gets a hold of celebrity DNA and then files a paternity suit based upon creating some new kids.
Could there be dinosaurs, please?
There could, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And people running from them.
We usually go out with a tip and resource of the week, and we have good ones for you this week, but I'm going to save them until next week because we've gone kind of long, and I enjoyed this DNA story a great deal. I think it's fascinating. I do, before we go out, want to just touch on the fact, or ask Evan, did someone really leave another iPhone in a bar?
That's what I hear, and you know, people are saying this must be Apple's pattern now. The story is that there's a prototype iPhone 5 that has gone missing from a beer garden somewhere out there in California. So, nothing much more of it on that. It hasn't shown up in the newsrooms anywhere at Gizmodo or Engadget or any of the people, you know, places who might want to have it, but it has been reported lost. And although I haven't had to, you know, do anything in response to that bet that I made with Ernie Svensson about wearing a Saints jersey if there was never a rest on the iPhone 4, I'm not going to make any bets about this one because it's just kind of starting to sound a little bit crazy with Apple and all of its lost prototype devices. So yeah,
well, I'm hearing from both the studio and the chat room are screaming at me that no, this turns out to have been a publicity stunt for the bar. So good try, bar. But it seems like Apple has managed to clamp down on its beer drinking employees, at least for the time being. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap this episode of This Week in Law. Thank you so much for joining us. You can follow along and see what we're getting ready for next week's show by following me on Google Plus or Twitter. I'm D. Howell there, and we have a Facebook page for the show at facebook.com/thisweekinlaw. So we'll keep you posted, and we'll see you. I guess our next show is on September 9th. And until then, thank you so much to this wonderful panel. Tim Street, great to chat with you again.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
It has been fun. Also, Eriq Gardner, wonderful to have you return to TWiL. Keep up the great work over at The Hollywood Reporter.
I appreciate that. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
All right. And glad you stayed high and dry last week. And finally, Evan, always fun to chat with you. Thanks so much for joining us again.
The same. Have a great holiday weekend. Really enjoyed our conversation. Tim, great to talk with you finally in you know, kind of real life. And Eriq, always good to talk with you.
All right, guys, with that, farewell until the next time. We'll see you next week on This Week in Law.